October 4th, 2023, Housing and Economic Development Committee. And so do we have anybody in person that wanted to talk during privilege of the floor? Okay, we have somebody virtually. Jeremy?
It looks like he has not arrived yet.
Okay, let me know if he does, and we can have him speak. Okay, so first off, a change to the agenda, just to give us more time and more flexibility for talking about the homelessness and housing update. I'm going to switch around, and I talked to Nick about doing this, so that we'll do the arts and culture and tourism grants first. So we're going to do that first, and let me see if there's anything else. I don't have anything for a chair's report, so I guess next, Lisa, do you have any report for us?
I don't have any report today. Since we met last night, I think we're all up to
caught
date.
up?
Yes.
Okay, great. And why don't we do the minutes approval too, just so we don't forget, and we'll get all the voting stuff out of the way. Would somebody like to move the minutes from the September 6th meeting? Let's see, Mike and Veronica seconds. And all those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. And also, Travis Brooks might tune into the meeting virtually, so we'll see if that happens in a little bit. And so, Nick, why don't you take it away? What do you have for us today?
Okay, thanks. Got 4 resolutions for tourism grants. Well, actually, technically 3 are for tourism grants, and 1 is for a negative determination of environmental significance. Kind of start in actually reverse order of what's shown on your agenda. At the bottom there is the 2023 Tourism Capital Grant Awards. This is the one that's tied to the NEGDEC resolution, so resolutions A and D on your agenda. We'll need to take those in that order. The other 2, the fall 2023 Tourism Advancement Grants and fall 2023 Community Celebrations Grants. These are grants that we offer twice a year. We just closed up our fall round of applications. Applications were due on August 31st, and we've got proposed awards in the resolutions and memo attached. So, yeah, we'll start with the capital grants because it's probably the most complex and biggest, and we need to do it in the right order. The capital grant program, this is intended to fund activities that support tourism infrastructure within the community.
And that's page 23.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, in the packet. There are 6 proposed awards in the resolution in front of you. 2 of them are for what we call feasibility studies. These are to look into the viability of a project. And those 2 are the Cycle CNY Ithaca Mountain Bike Skills Park and the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce Foundation study to make Yannick Overlook Visitor Center operational year-round. So those 2 are not for infrastructure per se, but for the evaluation portions of those projects. The other 4 are for actual physical changes to various locations. So we got some exciting projects in the mix this year, from the farmers market to Cinemapolis, the Science Center, and State Theater, all represented in this pool of awards. I think in general we're very satisfied with the types of applications that came through in this round, and believe that some of these are going to have, all these will have a potential to make major impacts in the tourism experience in our community. So that's the Tourism Capital Grant Awards. We work with the folks at IAED on this program. Their staff helps sort of guide applicants through the process and work with them on developing applications and making sure their projects are feasible before they get to the stage of filling out all the paperwork. So the one you'll notice in the seeker actions, there is one that is listed as unlisted, Seventh Art Corporation. It's pretty rare for us to have a tourism grant that is unlisted, but we did this time. Their project is to purchase the space that they're in from the current owner of that building, and they have As such, there's no seeker type 2 classification for that kind of activity, so we need a negative declaration for that.
Okay. Why don't we pause here, and then let's start off. So you said you want Resolution D first?
Oh.
Is that correct?
A first.
Oh, A, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
A. So why don't we get that one on the floor first? Would someone like to move that? It's Resolution A, making a negative determination of environmental significance in relation to the resolution for the 2023 award of 2023 tourism capital grants. Put on the floor by Veronica, seconded by Mike. Anything else on that one, Nick?
No, it's a pretty straightforward activity. We're not making any changes to the building, to the property. This is, a financial transaction.
Right, and I see, this is the one with, for Cinemapolis to look at trying to purchase their building to help keep their costs down.
Yeah, it would result in a substantial cost saving to the organization.
Okay, and I was up at the Teganic Overlook a couple weeks ago and was talking to them about, actually asked them about how they like their space, and they mentioned that they don't have any HVAC system at all. So they have vents that they can't even control, so they have just some ventilation to the outside. But they weren't complaining, but it would be nice for them to be open more often. Anything from the group?
But we're not on that resolution quite yet.
Oh, we're not
are
on
we?
that one yet? Which we're on the, oh, I'm sorry, I got on the wrong page, right. Thank you. All right, any comments on the one that we're on? Thanks, Veronica. Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Jordan, will you let me know if you see Travis come in? All right, thank you. All right, so the next one, is the next one in order?
Let's do Resolution D next, the
D.
tourism capital
Okay,
grants, because
so
that's
that's
the
where I
one
got
the
mixed
negative
up.
declaration was linked to.
And that's the one I already commented on. Okay, so let's put that one on the floor. Mike, seconded by Veronica. So this is on packet page 23, the 2023 Tourism Capital Grant Awards. Any further discussion? Mike?
I have two questions. The feasibility study, isn't Teganic Overlook Visitor Center, isn't that a state-owned thing?
That is correct, yeah. So this would be the study to look into whether the building, how much it would cost to basically make it a year-round facility. I would expect the costs of the actual improvements to be borne by the state agency that owns that property.
Does the state have any interest in doing that? I mean, they would be the ones that I would have to staff. I mean, it's their property. Why would they let us go on their property? I mean, have we talked to them?
I would believe there was a expression of interest in the application, which I have in this pile, but I also see Jennifer Tavares is on the call, so she may be able to answer your question more quickly.
While you're looking for that, Nick, and chairperson, if I may.
Go ahead.
Can't quite tell who's there. So we have certainly been in communication with the state and the regional director and their team about this on and off over many years. The lack of winterization and frankly summerization, if you will, of this building is very limiting to the operation, even during the season when we're open. So just want to be clear that there are days of the year, there are half days and full days, even during the May through October season when we're operating the visitor center, where the climate and weather concerns cause closures of the visitor center. So that's a concern. And then the inability to expand the season and be there year round is concerning. So we've been in discussion with them. Yes, they are the landlords. Yes, it is a lease. The state does own the building for sure. I think any recommended solutions, and depending on what the feasibility analysis says, will likely require a partnership and a lot of collaboration between their team and our team in order to, extend the season of the building. But really just the initial step is to understand what that would take, what the potential cost of that might be, and whether it's even feasible.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Jennifer.
Absolutely.
My second question is the Cinemapolis. This is to buy the space that they're in now, or at least the down payment on the space they're in now.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks. Any other questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. And then we'll go back to B.
Yeah.
And would anybody like to put that on the floor? That's award of Fall 2023 Tourism Advancement Grants. Veronica, and seconded by Mike. All right, thank you. Anything else or anything you want to tell us on that one?
Sure, I can give a little bit more detail on this one. The Tourism Advancement Grants, formerly known as the Tourism Project Grants and Tourism Marketing Grants, the intent of this program really is to support activities that can generate overnight travel demand to Tompkins County. One of these projects is a bit unusual. The Brockton-Dale Community Center came into as an application for a community celebrations grant, but at further review seemed a more appropriate fit for under this grant category. Otherwise, you'll see in this some organizations that you may recognize. Ithaca Festival, of course, in their annual programming to attract more talent for that event. The Ithaca Shakespeare Company for their Summer Shakespeare Festival. An exhibit for the Paleontological Research Institution at Museum of the Earth on mollusks. And Juneteenth, presented by Southside Community Center. So excited to see all these projects in there, and we have a bit of funding that was not allocated in this round that will be included in a budget adjustment for 2024. So that's basically it.
Thanks, Nick. Any discussion from the committee? Okay. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. And we're up to C on packet page 21, award of Fall 2023 Community Celebration Grants. Would someone like to put that on the floor? Moved by Veronica, seconded by Mike.
Sure. The Community Celebrations Grants are a longtime staple of the tourism program to help put together events that serve our local community. There's no need for these events to have a attraction for outside visitors, although sometimes they do. You'll see some events that you may recognize from years past and some that are new. We've got a decent spread of locations around the county where the investments will be made. So happy to answer any questions that folks have about these events.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Just, they look exciting, and I appreciate having to vote on funding them, because then I get to know what I should be doing at various days over the next 6 months.
It's too bad due to climate we don't see the ice sculptures on here anymore, but
Maybe someday.
you never know, right? Okay, all those in favor? All right, that passes unanimously. So anything else, Nick?
Not today.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, and so on to the, let's see, we're looking for Tammy. Tammy's attending virtually. So as we get into the next topic, homelessness and housing update, I just wanted to mention that legislator Rich John did email some comments. I haven't had time to read through them all. He sent them in about an hour ago on the topic that we're going to be covering. So those should have been emailed to folks. And I also wanted to comment that I appreciate through most of these reports that when we refer to people who are homeless, we refer to it in that way, people who are homeless. And I worked in mental health and various health-related settings and drug and alcohol addiction, and sometimes it's easy to call somebody an addict or a homeless person versus, and I'm just going to explain briefly what that can do is creates a stigma, and then it's hard for that person to kind of get out of that. We label that person, you know, as encompassing what condition they happen to have. So I appreciate the wording through most of this. And so we have some folks, Nels, was there anybody else from your, Cindy, did you want to come up to the table while we have the discussion in case you wanted to comment in? And Liddy? I'm sorry, I couldn't see who that was. Thank you. Oh, right, thank you. Okay. Actually, before we get into this, why don't we do, before I forgot our advisory board appointments. So as you guys are getting situated at the table, we have one advisory board appointment, Jeffrey Golden. It's the Ithaca College seat for the Strategic Tourism and Planning. Would someone like to move that? Mike moves it, Veronica seconds it. Although, any discussion? All those in favor? All right, that passes. Thank you, Veronica. Okay, so Tammy, do you want to turn your video on? Hi, thank you. And so we have Tammy Baker here, our Tompkins County Homeless Services Coordinator, and we have a couple of folks here in the room, so I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Nels Bone. I'm the Director of Community Development for the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency and a co-chair of the Continuum of Care.
My name is Lydia Barger. I'm the Director of Housing Initiatives, the Human Services Coalition, and the Continuum of Care Coordinator.
Hi, I am Cindy Wilcox. I am the Executive Director of the Human Services Coalition, also co-chair of the COC with Nels.
Great, well, thanks for joining us today. Okay, Tammy, I'll let you lead our discussion today, or at least do the presentation, but I'll just kind of open it up. How did you want to work this?
So I just want to say, first off, I'm sick. I've got COVID, so my voice will come in and out. That's why I'm not in person. So so bear with me. So the recommendations that I submitted to everybody in the memo it was completed in consultation with the planning department of the county, whole health, and DSS. And so the recommendations are addressing the key components of the plan. So I'm going to open so the recommendations wasn't just done with me, it was in collaboration with other county agencies or departments. So I just want to open up to see, hopefully everybody read it. Do you have questions? Instead of going through it from point by point, it would be probably helpful to just hear what questions people might have.
Okay, sure. Yeah, sorry to hear you're sick today.
Thank you.
People want to start with any questions or comments on this?
I have a lot of questions, but they were kind of point by point, so let me take a sec to
Go ahead.
reorganize my thoughts.
I'll see, I had, if you want to think about that, I think I had a couple.
Yeah, and I saw Rich John's email as well, but that's a lot to incorporate in the last, it was like almost 10 pages, so I appreciate his feedback, but it was a lot to incorporate for today.
Right. So, and as the request is for us the legislature to accept this, and what we're going to do today is just starts the conversation. So it's a possibility that at the next HED meeting, I think that's November 1st, we'll look at, we want to get input, as much as we can. And so at that point, we might look at a formal resolution to accept it. One of the questions I had was about housing surges, and this it's on page 4 where it talks about that we haven't yet experienced a housing surge. And it talks about emergency services grant, which I'm assuming was to help people who were already housed through COVID, to help them stay in place. Can somebody, and then it talks about the next housing surge will happen when the Erie project begins. Maybe I just don't understand what that means.
Right. It sounds like it depends on who you speak with. So I spoke with Lydia about this, and she says the housing surge hasn't happened yet. And Lydia, I'm glad that you're here at the meeting. It's good to have you here since you did so much work, you and Simone, and putting the plan together. So Lydia, with that discussion that we haven't had a housing surge, but I thought it was really helpful to note that when we got the ESG COVID money, we housed a lot of people with that influx of money coming in. And I thought that was a housing surge, but it sounded like it wasn't. And so it sounds like the next housing surge, and Lydia, you can speak to this too. This was according to Lydia, was the Erie project that's going to be happening on Green Street with Vicino.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, chime in. Just pull this
I'm so
about
sorry. Yep.
Hi. Hello.
4 to 6 inches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Liddy.
So a housing surge is a specific model, right? So it has there's design elements to a surge that make it a surge, which is why I would say that what has not happened yet. It involves significant pre-planning, creating what we call a by name list of persons that are being targeted or served with the surge. Alignment, there's a lot of like pre-planning and supports and work put into it. It's a specific model, right? What happened with ESG-CV, ESG Emergency Solutions Grant COVID was funding that came into our community through COVID relief funds. There were 4 components to the way that funding was used. There was a prevention component, prevent homelessness. There was a rapid rehousing component to rapidly rehouse people experiencing homelessness. Law New York had a component, and then actually HSC did some, supported the porta potties in the encampment with ESG-CV. The difference between what happened with ESG-CV and a housing surge is that ESG-CV was not coordinated in that same way, did not come with like, it's a voucher program. So people were given their vouchers, they had monthly case management supports provided through Tompkins County DSS, but it wasn't targeted or coordinated in any way. We know that because there was an affordable housing property that came online that coincided with the timing of the ESG-CV project coming into our community, that there was a population of people using ESG-CV all at the same time to move into the same property, but it wasn't an intended surge. So the next surge, or the first surge, as I would call it, will be we're starting now. So what the part that we're planning now is to create the by name list of people who are experiencing chronic homelessness in our community, to begin preparing them to move into the 40 set aside ESHI units, Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative units planned for the Asteri project, which is going to be leasing up early 2024. So that will be a surge in that we already have buy-in from the property manager, the developers, some social service agencies, to all really be working together, focused on those 40 people. What's it going to, who needs ID, who needs, what does everybody need? How do we get them moved in? And then how do we continue to best support them in that housing? Instead of just pumping out vouchers and a bunch of people moved into the same place. Does that help clarify what that?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for all that information. It sounds very holistic, which, looks like the plan, is trying to be. And
housing surges are a model that are adopted from disaster response. So FEMA, and other disaster response agencies are where the model is sourced from.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought of when I first read surge. And then I started reading it. Yeah, but this helps give us some of the skills too to help, transfer those skills over to if we have something like that, like we have a disaster, whether it's a flood, people need to be rehomed, or some other influx of folks.
Okay. This seems like it's similar to, and Lydia, you can correct me on this, the permanent ESHI, the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, those permanent supportive units have to come from coordinated entry lists. So we already have a list, by name list of people on the coordinated entry. So it's similar to the Art House, where they had 40 set aside units for 18 to 25-year-old homeless youth that came from the coordinated entry list. It was an ESHI project. So we already have something like that in our community, the way that it's being described right now. So it sounds like it's really similar to what happened at the Art House with the ESHI, 40 set-aside units for ESHI.
Wow, okay. Yes, although there's more concerted supports in advance of moving in for this group of people than there will have been for the last ESHI.
Maybe we can take turns with different questions, or if you have something about that, just everybody feel free to chime in.
Just clarifying, so it sounds like the ESHI units at the Asteri project are sort of similar in administrative structure to the Ishai units that are going to, that for the 18 to 25-year-olds at Art House, which was managed not the same as like the whole, not managed, but like they were in Art House, but they were separate from the rest of the Art House units, right? I just bring that up because I know that like there was a lot of press about Art House and like problems there, but I've also understood that in the Ishai units in particular, things were going better. But, you know, the former director's online, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, what?
They're not separate. They're all in one same building. They'll be the same thing at the Assyri project. There'll be 40 units for people that are chronically homeless, the severe service need population that we've talked about. But they're all going to be, it's all be in the same building. So it's the same sort of setup. So there were concerns at the Art House specific. Yeah, so I don't want to go into the details of the Art House, but yeah, it's a similar setup. So the Art House, the Ishai came from TC Action. So they did all the paperwork, making sure people had their IDs and everything before they applied to move there. So the same thing would probably happen for the Assyri project because it's also being run by Tompkins Community Action.
Okay, that makes sense. But then the new thing that would make this a surge is the extra work being done beforehand. And maybe some other stuff?
Yeah, it's all before and after. The differences are about how the population of people identified through coordinated entry for the surge are being served before and after move-in. The move-in details are all the same.
And I feel like that's like the details, I mean, the support that's part of Ishai is that it comes with support. So the support is prior to move in and then support is continuous while you're still housed in one of those units.
I guess while we're on the surge topic, I had I think the last bullet point in the memo here notes that our community doesn't have a list of landlords willing to house individuals that are chronically homeless outside of permanent supportive housing. But we could make a list, right? Or are you saying that there just simply aren't any landlords willing to do this? Oh, I don't know who I'm asking.
According to the last survey that I received from the COC, there doesn't seem to be a list of landlords that currently are willing to accept this population. A very small percentage outside of the people that are part of the permanent supportive housing, which is mostly Tompkins Community Action at this point, and Ithaca Neighborhood Housing. They have permanent supportive housing at Founders Way.
So do we need a list? Can we make a list? Is that overcomable?
I think that's something that the COC is working on. They have somebody working, they have a landlord liaison.
Yeah, there's a committee that's working on it, and it's an interesting like nuance, right? Because there is not a list of landlords who say, yes, sign me up to house people experiencing homelessness. That said, there are hundreds and hundreds of people who have exited homelessness into rental housing successfully in our community. So we know that there are landlords who are willing, who are renting to people who are exiting homelessness. But there is not a list. TC Action has a list of, and Ithaca Housing Authority too, of landlords who are signed up for the Section 8 program, which is not the same, but that's the closest thing to a landlord list that exists in our community.
Do we have a list of landlords, period?
I don't think so.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, DSS has a list that they hand out to people that are looking for housing. And I'm not sure if 211 does or not. Maybe Cindy could speak to that, or Liddy, if somebody calls 211 looking for a landlord information. I'm not sure if 211 provides that or not, but I know DSS provides a landlord list.
Give them the DSS list.
Yes.
211 does.
Mike, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to make an observation and then I'll ask a couple questions. I mean, I'm on the Section 8 landlord list, and IHA has, they know who rents. Frankly, everybody has to. That's the law, but I find the major problem is I'll have somebody come in and look at an apartment and they'll say, well, you know, do you take Section 8? And I'll say, yes. Oh, well, I'll have my caseworker or whatever call you, and then I never get a call. So, I mean, that's one of two things. Either the Section 8 person isn't following up, or it's somebody from an activist community that's trying to push the envelope and see if landlords are following the law. And I think that's probably more the case than the latter. I can't imagine a caseworker not getting on the phone and saying, oh, I've got, like this one woman I rented to, I mean, she's a single mother, she's got an autistic child, this apartment that I rented her is very close to her mother. I mean, it checks all the boxes. And her caseworker was like on it, like, yeah, no, you know, this is who she is. She had a job. I talked to her boss. I mean, so, but then I had other people, oh no, I love the apartment. I love the apartment. I'll have my person call you, and it just doesn't happen. And it's like, okay, that was a misrepresentation.
Oh,
That happens a lot.
Right.
You're going to have a lot of landlords who just aren't going to deal with it. I mean, to be honest with you.
Right. I just want to be cautious about being, you know, that could be one scenario. I'm sure there could be other scenarios or other things of why people, that they don't follow through, or they decide on a different apartment, or it could
And that's
be
fine,
some other
too.
things too.
But that would be peculiar to me. If to not even have the caseworker call seems odd, because it's just odd. Anyway, my questions, though, when it comes to this report, are we going to prioritize homeless? Like right now, it's my understanding, I don't know if this is still the case, Tammy, but we had 9 families with children that did not have a house. And I would think that those would be prioritized because we got to get those kids in school. I mean, are we looking at it like that? Are we not looking at it like that?
Yeah, I don't have the update, Mike, of how many families are in shelter right now. My guess it's still probably 7 or 8, and they're on the coordinated entry list, and so they would take priority. We talked about that before, that being a vulnerability score. So if their family's there and something comes up, their name would come up first on the list.
Right. Okay, yep. No, I remember you did talk about that, the list. I'm wondering, too, there's something in there about, I don't know if it's really people in the jungle or something like that, but there were things in there like the barriers to placing people into housing. And some of them are like, you know, the person's a sex offender, the person has a dog, the person, I forget what, those are 2 good examples, though. I mean, are we looking at a scenario where we're like, listen, we want to play, how do we fix that? Like, I can't fix whether somebody's a sex offender or not, so I don't know how you then place that person. The other thing is, like, if somebody has a dog, again, the only way you can fix that is to say you can't have a dog. Or are we suggesting we're going to have housing that is also going to be housing pets and things like that? It seems like we're making that really complicated, so that's why I'm asking.
Well, people that are on the sex registry, if they go through the shelter, there's a specific hotel that they're housed in. Same with people that are on parole, so they're separate. They're not going to be housed at the shelter, or they're a very specific hotel that they're housed in. And in terms of the animals, the shelter just recently changed their policy of not allowing, if you have a service animal, you could bring the service animal in, but emotional support animals, you can't. People had been bitten, and there's been aggression, and dog poop had to be cleaned up. So at the shelter specifically, they can't have, you can't shelter a dog. And that was a conversation between DSS and the shelter coming up with that policy for the safety of everybody.
No, and I mean, that's something that I think is correct. I'm just wondering then what happens to that group of people? Like I mean, do we say to them, listen, we want to help you, but you need to change this? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I don't know how there's going to be a certain percentage of people that we're not going to be able to house.
I know the shelter was working with SPCA and fostering some of the animals until individual got housed. So you're right, it is complicated if somebody has it, because that would deter them from going into shelter. I'm not clear, actually, if they get approved for temporary housing assistance, if they could bring their emotional support animal to the hotel or not. I know they can't bring them into the shelter itself. But you're right, so that's something we've got to keep a discussion going. One of the things I made a recommendation is that we sit down with the shelter, DSS, and the COC together to talk about the barriers and see, is there a way that we can mitigate that together? We can't do this one organization at a time. We have to work together to figure out what are some of the solutions or some of the barriers that people are experiencing.
I just have two more questions then, because one dovetails off of this. Like on the list for, this was the encampment dwellers, but I mean, I would imagine this is a lot of people. It's unwillingness to engage in addiction services or to refrain from using substances. I mean, I could understand how we take people in who are high or drunk or whatever the case, like in a shelter situation. But I never foresee an instance where we're going to allow drug use in any of our facilities. Is that the position of this report, or is that not the position of this report?
I don't think that that is the position of.
Can you move up to the mic, Lydia?
Sorry, no, it is not the position of the report that drug use should be encouraged in facilities.
And then my last question. When it comes to housing, I know the report, it says we need a lot more housing, which I don't disagree with, but I'm just wondering, I mean, I think everybody agrees with that we need more housing. I'm just wondering how we get it built. Are we suggesting more of a public kind of build, or I know the IDA, we have a 20% rule that a lot of people just buy their way out of now. I mean, I didn't know if the report had a position on that or not, or any kind of ideas on how we do that. I mean.
Well, there's two different things, Mike. So it's like trying to get people that are experiencing homeless that are in the shelter, how to get them housed. And in order to be housed, unless it's cold blue where there's it's very low barrier, you just say you're homeless and you need shelter. But right now, if you go to DSS and you want to apply for a shelter, and there's a process to go through. And one of the processes is to meet with the CASAC, which is the credentialed alcohol and drug counselor. And through that, it's just like a very quick 10, 15-minute conversation. But if they decide they want to refer you, if the decision is made based on how you answer the questions, that you are referred to either substance use or mental health support, if you don't follow through with that referral, then you would not be in compliance and wouldn't get the temporary housing assistance. So that's when somebody that's actively maybe using, they may not want to stop using, which you actually don't have to because our treatment providers are not abstinence-based at this point. But that's a barrier for people accessing. If somebody's actively using, it is a barrier for people getting into the shelter system because they are choosing, maybe they don't want to deal with their substance at this point. So that's one of the barriers where people wouldn't access shelter. But if you are in treatment and you are still actively using and you're approved for temporary housing assistance, you can stay at the shelter. I think one thing I pointed out in the report is if you're at the shelter and you show up and you're under the influence, they are just going to sit with you in the friendship center until they deem you safe to go up to your apartment, to your unit, which is different from the hotels because the hotels aren't staffed the way the shelter is. So that's one advantage of having a larger shelter and everybody in one area. I think there's going to be more eyes on people and more support. When you have people scattered in different hotels, it's hard to keep a pulse on everybody.
Thank you, Tammy. Veronica?
Yeah, I wanted to respond to something earlier. Maybe it's a little more holistic, but I was thinking about the discussion of pets and things, which, glad we're looking into ways to manage that. I am currently fostering a cat for a family that has, actually they texted me today, they think they're gonna move into housing by the end of the year, but I've had this guy for 10 months. More program like that would, chip at a corner of the challenge. But speaking of the challenge, I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Continuum of Care's goals and maybe like the HUD's housing goals, her homelessness goals broadly is to make homelessness rare, brief, and one time. And that is a thing that encompasses like all people. I don't have at hand like our county's goals around housing, but if someone does, or if we have some, chime in. If we're gonna make homelessness rare, brief, and one time, that like has to apply to everybody, and people of all sorts of backgrounds and ways of being, and like, you know, we all contain multitudes, and the community contains multitudes of us, and just, the system that we have now, or at least certainly the state funded, like through DSS and OTDA and whatever's, doesn't like, it has restrictions, it has a structure, and so it might work for a lot of people, and I think it, you know, it provides lots and lots of support to lots of people, but it's gonna be limited, and just by nature, it cannot address like all people's needs with only like rare, brief, and one-time fallouts. So I don't think we should be thinking about like, how could we make it so certain people or types of people can fit into our system? That simply isn't gonna happen. And I think it's helpful to acknowledge that and then look at like, what else? Like, should the county end up funding like shelter opportunities that are not run by or through DSS? Or should we like coordinate, maybe not even fund, but like coordinate the creation of other types of situations? Are we gonna have to like be okay with the existence of places where people are like living indoors consistently and using drugs and not gonna stop? Yes, somewhere. It doesn't have to be like in our like main shelter or in your particular rental units if you're a landlord, but like it's gonna be somewhere, at least if we want our community to like contain the people it contains who have lived here a long time, and we want it to stay as like diverse and robust as it is.
That's a good point. I know a lot of times people think about when people are homeless as if they just like appeared out of nowhere, for instance, and they were housed at one point, and whether they have a mental health issue or a drug and alcohol addiction and or use issue, you know, these people have been in our community. I mean, we have a few new people, but generally these are people that are here already and that are hopefully going to be housed again. Nels?
Yeah, I think the focus of the plan is really to develop a strategy to address unsheltered homelessness and try to reduce that number. And the concern I have about accepting the plan versus trying to find areas to adopt or, you know, work plans based out of it is that it's kind of a status quo approach, and our status quo approach hasn't been that successful. And I think one area that the county is very involved in or could potentially make a lot of progress in would be to reduce barriers to access to shelter, just as you were mentioning. If they don't get into shelter, they're basically going to be out in the jungle or couch surfing, and that has all sorts of negative impacts for their ability to get stabilized and also impacts on the neighborhood. So I think that's an area where I think there's some opportunity for progress, and I think the recommendation from staff was to kind of develop a working group on that, but I think it would be great if the county would also kind of formally endorse that. Acceptance of a plan is a very low-level bar in some respects. I think you have choices of accept, reject, adopt, and refer back or something like that. So acceptance is a relatively modest one, and I think it could be perceived by some as if we're going to put it on the shelf and that's the end of the issue, whereas I hope there's some outcomes out of this. It may not be the only strategy to go forward, but I think identifying some working directions out of this are really the key issues, and I really appreciate that the county has created a coordinator position for homelessness, and also, the work to help and coordinate and collaborate with the city on trying to create a green zone that provides services and facilities for some safe hygienic locations. for sanctioned encampments, but that's a symptom of the problem, not solving the problem. And I think the goal of the plan was really try to get at the core issue and work on that. There was one other addition I just want to mention is that the city received a home ARP grant, another one of those COVID grants era things, which is designed to address, again, resources to reduce unsheltered homelessness. And the city's goal for that is to provide rental assistance and supportive services for when somebody gets into housing to kind of augment the surge activities going forward. So there'll be some resources for landlords out of that. Also an ability to provide ESHI-like supportive services, wraparound services for people who need that extra help once they get housing. So I think that's one tool that will help, but I think that the main recommendations of permanent supportive housing, reducing barriers to shelter, the surge, are things that are broadly supported by the community. Both the IRA and the city did endorse the plan. We had an extra middle standard between adopt and accept, which was endorse, which supports and agrees with the recommendations of the plan. So I encourage you to think about where you can find places to adopt or move forward with elements of the plan that you think are supportive of county policy.
Thanks for that feedback, Nels. Mike?
No, I feel like maybe we're talking past each other a little bit, just because here's my question. Listen, I don't think you have anybody that's against a wet shelter. Somebody shows up and is, like I said, under the influence of drugs, and then they sit in the Friendship Center until they can be sent up to their room. My question is, how long can they do that for? I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, Veronica, I don't know, but I mean, this is housing opportunity, and I would think that treatment would be some part of that. And it sounds to me like there are other folks that say, no, we're going to put you in housing and you can live your life as you want. I mean, they can, I suppose, but we've got a lot of need, and we're not going to be able to house everybody. And if that person is not going to be successful I would imagine treatment will be part of them being successful. I mean, it's not just a matter of just giving somebody a house and here you go. Okay, no responsibility whatsoever for your own well-being. I guess that's what I'm missing out on.
I mean, I don't think anyone's saying just like, here's a house, here you go. No, that's what the idea.
House, an apartment, you understand what I mean.
That's not what I meant. I mean, like the housing, it doesn't have to be a house, but the idea of permanent supportive housing is it would come with supports. I think that, absolutely, like substance use disorder treatment is a need, and I think, treatments should be much more available to people who might need or want them, and a variety of treatments, because not everything works for everybody. But at the end, and you'd want to build like a robust enough system such that like the vast majority of people currently homeless or housing insecure and with substance use disorder are have ways to get housed and treated, sober if they want, stable, however. But there's probably going to be some people who that's just not going to work for, whatever you set up. And so I guess I'm saying at the end of the day, for every last person, I don't want the final conclusion to be ultimately you, the individual, have to change. I get no sticks, but a field of all kinds of carrots.
Go ahead.
So I'm fairly new to this housing world, and one of the Liddy has done a great presentation on kind of the Home Together Tompkins plan, and she has this great upside down triangle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So the idea is, right, Maslow's hierarchy is, what are the basic needs, right? Food, clothing, and shelter. So if you don't have food, clothing, and shelter, how do you self-actualize? How do you manage, how are you in the right mindset or mind space to do anything but survive if you don't have housing? And that really resonated with me. I'm like, oh, I get it, because if you don't have those things, you can't get to dealing with your substance use problem or dealing with your mental health issues, or stabilizing relationships that will help you do those things. So housing is foundational to facilitating all of those other things. And that's how we are approaching, and that's kind of the whole idea of the housing first philosophy, which is not housing only. So once you have housing, then it's much easier to facilitate all of those other challenges that people have when they are unhoused.
Another key feature of Housing First is that it grants people rights of tenancy. That's a core. So there's two things I want to say about Housing First, although we don't have to talk about it forever. Housing First, there's like the lost second half of Housing First, which is services second. Housing First approach only ever includes projects that provide services. There's no such thing as a Housing First project that does not come with supports. You couldn't call it a Housing First project if there weren't included supports. I just want to make that clear. There's a lot of...
No, thank you for making that clear.
Yeah. It's like, that's not a thing. It's housing then. It's just how anybody else gets housing if it's not supports, but it's not a Housing First project if supports are not included. I forgot my other point because I got excited about the services second point. Oh, the rights of tenancy. So the other sort of thing that is maybe lesser known or understood about Housing First is that critical feature of it is that persons who are living in permanent supportive housing or in a Housing First project have tenants' rights and responsibilities, right? So there are the same natural consequences that are built in to you and I's rental agreements in those rights of tenancies for people who are living in those projects. So there are natural consequences built in. A Housing First project is going to attempt to make every possible way to bring in all the services before they're going to evict a person, but it's not actually even that uncommon for people to be evicted using the court process from a permanent supportive housing project. So Housing First is misunderstood, and I know that, and I'm happy. I'll talk about it all day. But if somebody is operating a program with fidelity to Housing First, they would never say, you can live here forever, you can do whatever you want, you just are in a house, just rock out. That's just not part of Housing First. In fact, Housing First is designed to bring those services combined with the tenancy to the highest need people in a community. That is all. Sorry.
And can I make one more point? To your point about housing, you said, well, how do we get more housing? Boy, Mike, if I had a magic wand. But I do think it is multifaceted because there's all kinds of levels, right? There's an advocacy component. There is a component of funding at the state level. I know that Governor Hochul's budget has some additional funding for, is it ESHI
and HAP, a few Housing First folk-centered projects.
Right. I also think there's some local opportunities around things like zoning and, those kind of things. The other opportunity, and I know the Tompkins Chamber has a housing task force that's kind of looking at those things to kind of help facilitate housing at all levels, which is and HSE is part of that. And, one of the other things also is, I got the Liddy problem. I forgot my last thing. Relationships, right? So, for example, the COC, by the way, for those of you who don't know, the Continuum of Care, or the COC, is a network of 30 plus providers in the community that are working on these issues around serving people that are unhoused. So relationships. So we have an ESHI working group that brings together both providers and developers of ESHI projects to try to work through what those challenges might be so we can help facilitate more development. So there's a, we haven't solved the problem yet, but we're trying.
Any other questions? Comments?
I just want to speak to the housing first piece. I think what's the missing piece is it's a non-compliance based program. So you're absolutely right. I think everybody has a right to be housed, but you can provide services and nobody has to engage in the services until they're ready. So I think what part of the recommendation is, how do we build in more of an accountability to the permanent supportive housing so somebody doesn't do damage to the building or to the apartment or make it unsafe for other people living in the apartment complex. So that's the piece of housing first. There's not a compliance-based program. So absolutely, you can provide, the supports are essential, the relationships are essential. But somebody could choose not to engage at all, and it could be really disruptive. So I'd love to see, how do we build an accountability to our moving forward for permanent supportive housing? So people could actually get access the supports that are available for them.
So Tammy, were you saying you'd like to see how we could build a system where there's some accountability, that someone doing, what they want to do, whether they engage in services or not, but they're not infringing on rights of other people living there?
Yes. Yeah, behavior doesn't change. When you're homeless and you get housed, behavior doesn't change. So how do we build in the supports that people, and supports with accountability, so people actually are willing to engage in the supports so that they can sustain their housing? I know even at the Art House, 13% of the people that were evicted came from the homeless shelter. People from the ESHI program got evicted. The permanent supportive housing at Founder's Way, some people are getting evicted. So it's not an end all. So if that's happening, I'm wondering, how do we build in accountability with the supports, the wraparound services that are offered in permanent supportive housing? Which is just something I would like the city and the county to consider as we move forward, building more projects.
So some accountability besides they just get evicted. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I had a question regarding the 3 enhanced centralized housing navigator positions. If you had the packet, it's packet page 7, or it's on 5 of your report, Tammy. So it says that the HSC, the Human Services Coalition, was awarded $174,000 from the County Recovery Fund, and some of that, $72,000, is being used for hiring one or more housing specialists. So do we have an idea yet of how we'd get to 3 housing navigators and what that funding would be?
I have a question after this, too.
Did you hear that question, Tammy?
You're on mute.
The COC just recently had that money, and they hired 2 outreach workers, 2 housing navigators. So I'm just going to ask Liddy or Cindy to speak on what the status is of the third one, the third navigator that you wanted to hire.
We have 1 housing navigator currently that was funded with different private funding and will be sustained using some of this TCRF funding for a period of time. That's Brett Irish. His sort of specialty is eviction prevention work. So the idea behind the 3 housing navigators is that they have 3 separate sort of specialties. one to work with people who are currently experiencing homelessness, one that would work with people who are exiting homelessness into a permanent housing destination, and then the third to prevent eviction. There is one at HSC. We ran an RFP to try to locate a provider in the community for the second housing navigation position, and it was not successful, I guess is the best way to put it. We are going to be reissuing that RFP with some more clarity this month. And in terms of funding more of them, I mean, it's actually a pretty commonly funded thing right now. It's becoming, it's getting included in some other funding streams to fund housing navigation. Tompkins Community Action in their mobility grant has a position that is going to be able to be a little bit more like a housing navigator. I'm pretty confident that organizations and agencies who are interested in having a housing navigator, which is different than a street outreach worker, would be successful in finding that funding. I mean, we could talk, there's some in the addendum that we could talk about, but $72,000 is a one-year pilot. So no matter what, we're already looking for sustainable funding for that role. It's not like a one and done.
Great, thank you.
I had a question you almost touched on, was can you clarify what a housing navigator does versus what an outreach worker does and what a street outreach worker is? Because I'm a little confused.
It's confusing. I think it's in the report as we're calling it, but it may not be because it came a little bit later for the TCRF funding to really flesh out the positions. There's a full description of what the vision for each role is in that TCRF application. So, but basically, it is a person, well, it depends on which one we're talking about, right? So we call them 1, 2, and 3 because that's how we call them. So Housing Navigator 1 is the vision for a position that would be working with people who are currently experiencing homelessness. And so they're not doing basic needs. They're not doing bringing the socks and water. Their whole job is to be focused on housing application, coordination between other providers that are working with that person, with just like sort of solely focused on permanent housing or emergency shelter. Housing Navigator 2 is the vision is for them to have, each of these positions are envisioned to have 10 to 12 sort of intensive case management people in their caseload, but the ability to do light touch contact with several hundred in a year. So Housing Navigator 2, 10 to 12 intensive case management, and then light touch for more, would be working with people who had recently exited an experience of homelessness into a permanent housing destination, to make sure that they know how to pay their NICEAG bill, know how to get their trash tags, my new favorite conversation, whatever, all of those sort of early on 3 to 6 months of stabilizing in that housing. And for people who aren't being served through another support agency, right? So a person who moved into the ESHI unit wouldn't then also be working with this housing navigator. It is designed to be for the people who are moving into housing using something just like a Section 8 voucher, which does not come with case management. So it's to enhance the case management for people who are exiting homelessness and don't have supports in their housing. And then Housing Navigator 3 is Brett Irish. We love him. He's great. And that is about preventing preventable evictions, like non-payment evictions, or other legally preventable evictions for people who have been housed after an episode of homelessness. 10 to 12 intensive case management, hundreds of light touch. And then a street outreach worker is doing basic needs, linkages, relationship building, all of those things, literally meeting people where they are, getting to know them, all of those things. And our current street outreach team either sort of does or doesn't have a housing focus, depending on which street outreach who they're working with. But if the current street outreach team, if Housing Navigator 1 existed, if the current street outreach group was working with someone who expressed an interest in being housed quickly, they could connect them with Housing Navigator 1 and then continue to do basic needs and imminent, services for the rest of the population without then adding the intense caseload that is locating housing. That's the idea. That's the model.
Could see a nice flow chart
The
if
flow
there's
chart.
not already.
I think there is a flow chart in the TCRF.
Veronica loves flow
application.
charts.
Do you? Oh, yeah, we can get you.
This has become a joke recently, but it's very true, so I'll take it.
And can I
ahead,
just
Cindy.
add, those three positions, that continuum was designed in partnership with the COC network over the last, for about a year we worked on it. And it was a result of the gaps that were identified in the 2021 homeless and housing needs assessment that was partially funded by the city and the county.
And for your, the specialists for eviction prevention, can't remember what the exact title was, but
He's Housing Specialist 3.
yes, that. So there's probably, just trying to think of all the different, aspects they'd need to know with people with disabilities and
Sure.
financial, all in legal, like you said, legal or criminal stuff. So anyway, I appreciate all the work that they do and you folks trying to coordinate all that. Any other questions or things to discuss today? Mike?
My last question would be about, I appreciate that we're filling these roles of outreach, and my question, though, is it's my understanding that we're having trouble kind of even going into certain areas of the city. And should we as a county kind of maybe focus on giving those people security? If Ithaca Police Department can't give those people security, then is that something that's needed so that we can even get into these areas to get to these people? We can have all the coordinators we want, but if they can't get to where the people are, then that would seem to be a problem to me. So,
Right, do they need some type of escort to get in there? Any thoughts, comments?
Only Housing Navigator 1 would need to get in there, I guess is my thought. But I don't know if Tammy wants to speak to the rest of that question.
There's a lot of outreach workers in different organizations, OAR, REACH, Salvation Army, Family and Children's Services. So people are going out. Some people in OAR, their outreach goes into all the encampments. They were doing peripheral outreach, so they were setting up, they were just hanging out outside or behind Walmart and at the wall behind Agway, Thursdays, I think, in the afternoon to provide support for people. And people also know, people in the encampments know where there's support. They know they can go to OAR, they can go to the Friendship Center, they can go to REACH. So even if people aren't accessing them in the homeless encampment, people know where their supports are available for them. But the outreach team is still having a presence in the homeless encampment. And a lot of the outreach team they do the housing. When I was an outreach worker, you worked with them. You worked with them once they got housed, and you worked with them, helping them find housing. So some outreach, and as Liddy said, depending on who the outreach worker is, it's a continuum. So some people work with people in the streets, help them find housing, do the basic needs, all of that, and then support them once they're housed. And it's not consistent on how the different outreach workers work. But I think it's really important that even if the outreach workers aren't going into the homeless encampment, they know where to go. If you hang out outside of OAR, it's a constant flow of people coming and going, getting basic needs, touching as a touchstone for people. They also they have a few housing people in OAR as well. So there's a lot of services that are provided right now for this population that we're talking about.
Thank you. Lisa, did you have any comments or questions? Just want to make sure you had the opportunity if you did.
Oh, thank you. No, I think this is a good beginning of the discussion, and certainly more.
Anything else other folks wanted to say while they're here?
I just have a
Liddy.
quick thing to say, because I'm excited about the plan. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I'm excited about it. I want people to be excited about it. I think it's interesting. I think like just the conversation that you and I had, Mike, to just now about what is housing first and where does services play in is like critical for the community to have. And to that end, there will be a Home Together Summit is its current name, here in Ithaca, November 28th. It's going to be moderated by Nichelle Carver, who's our United States Interagency Council on Homelessness regional representative. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities to engage with components of the plan, experts at state and federal levels, each other, the city, the county, all of us. And so I would encourage everyone to come to that when you get invited. And I do think that people will be able to walk away with sort of a fuller understanding of the plan, the origin of the plan, the intent of the plan, and be able to make really informed decisions about it in the future. So that's my one little plug.
Great. Thank you, Letty. And so I wanted to say thanks to Cindy, Letty, and now, Veronica.
Oh, well, is it time to wrap up? Because I have like 4 more questions, but I could save it.
Go ahead. I didn't realize. Go ahead.
It's because I'm sitting next to you.
We have 50 more minutes.
I know.
So.
I won't take that long. Thank you for that invitation, or the pre-invitation, the save the date for the summit.
Save the date.
Yeah.
Confirmed today.
Yeah. Talking about like accepting or adopting the plan, I know we're not choosing it now. I mean, we don't even have the plan itself in front of us, but I think this was a good step toward that. But I am like, I would love to, find at least like a subset of the plan that we could adopt. I don't know, like, which I think I heard Nels, you encouraging. And also I'm noticing even in here on the first page of Tammy's memo, was it a mention of potentially efforts to advocate to New York State that they commit to a housing first model? And I think no one's mentioned that out loud yet, but I would love to see us do that, because that, we can't control what New York State does, but it seems like that would be addressing a bunch of the challenges that are coming up here in this discussion. I guess that wasn't a question.
Any response to that?
Oh, wait, I did have a question. Same paragraph, bottom of page 1, I remember the question. It says, accepting the plan may require additional county investments in community agencies that are not subject to all the same state regulations as the county. But Tammy, did you mean adopting the plan would require that? Or does that really mean accepting the plan would require it?
Well, hold on. It's more about accepting the plan. Like so in order to have a low barrier shelter where people wouldn't have to go through DSS, somebody has to pay for that, right? So that's really expensive. So who would pay for somebody? And if we had a low barrier shelter that people didn't go through DSS, everybody would avoid DSS and just go to this low barrier shelter. Right, so that's pretty expensive. So is it possible to work with OTDA on the regulations? Is there any wiggle room in the regulations that we could house more people, provide temporary housing assistance for more people with the OTDA regulations? Because right now the regulations are the regulations. DSS can't do much about that. And again, I'm not sure how much wiggle room there is in that and how the regs can be interpreted. But if they are what they are, in order to have a completely low barrier shelter, that's going to cost the county a lot of money, because again, who's going to pay for that if everybody just goes to that particular shelter?
So if we did within the framework of the Office of Temporary Disability regulations, we'd get more in reimbursement? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think we'd get reimbursement if we didn't follow their regulations.
Right, so if we had rather than a barrier-free, you're saying a barrier-free is, we'd have to pay more for?
Yes.
So within the regulations, we'd get more reimbursement? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. My question was a language question about accepting versus adopting. Like, if we adopt the plan, we're committing to do our part to execute all the stuff in it, including a low barrier shelter. But if we were to just accept the plan, that doesn't commit it. I know no one wants to put it on the shelf. I'm really just asking about one word in the last sentence, and that may be difficult when you have COVID.
I think that we're moving forward. I don't think, even if it's not adopted, we're having a conversation. The conversation hasn't happened before. So I think we're moving things forward. The city, we're going to be having the land use and homeless working group. That's moving things forward. The city and county working together. The city they have their draft policy, as you know. But right now, it's still sort of a tacit encampment. They have designated green area, but what happens if somebody camps anywhere else in the city? We don't have information around that. There's no enforcement or regulation around that. So I think that even if it's accepted at this point, we're moving it forward. People want to see movement in this area.
I see Katie Bergella has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I just pulled up Rule 10 of the legislature, or X, and to adopt it means that you're formally committing to implementing the recommendations in the report. So you need to make sure that you agree with all the recommendations in the report and are committing to implement it, to adopt it. Accept it, obviously, is a lower barrier. I will say, we have a lot of plans and strategies that go through the legislature. And for a few years there, we were using the term endorse. We were pulled back from using that, but if you if you wanted to try for that again, that could be an option. It's trying to find that middle ground, but it doesn't, have significantly different meaning than to accept it.
Thank you, Katie. Veronica?
Yeah, a question, I guess, on the later page, but, Katie, while you're on camera, I maybe want you back, or since multiple of our planners are here, there's a mention of working with DPS around permanent supportive housing options, and I know Elliot in particular has been interested in that. Can you just give a little ad hoc update on what you've been doing and how it's looking?
I can try, and I will probably turn to Megan and Elliot for more information, but I frankly just got true clarity on this issue recently and understand that in the original housing strategy of the counties from 2017, there was not a specific number given for permanently supportive housing units needed because they wanted to understand the data better. In 2019, that number was formalized as 100 PSUs. We have achieved that goal. And then in 2022, the Home Together also reviewed updated new information and came up with a new 100 PSU threshold a goal that we're trying to meet. So I believe in the report that Tammy put together, the projections are for 103 units to be built in the next couple of years. So I think we're on target through a lot of work of many, many partners, but also our Community Housing Development Fund as well. But Megan and Elliot, if you have anything you want to add.
I think that largely covers it. The Community Housing Development Fund has, been involved with some of the projects that Tammy has listed in the pipeline, as well as, completed projects. And so that program is, completely open to supporting those units. And Elliot often, or I might get, communications from developers exploring projects in the early stages before they're ready to kind of come public with anything. And so, it's something that, when we're explaining the needs within the county, that we make sure to highlight as well.
I guess I would just add to that we did speak with Liddy and HSC about our various programs and how they can support Home Together. So in terms of Community Housing Development Fund, like Megan mentioned, we're always working with developers to look for opportunities for supportive housing. as well as the outreach we're doing to municipalities, look for housing development opportunities. So we've been communicating with Liddy on those resources available.
Added it to your housing tracking spreadsheet. You added a column. That's progress.
What was that, Liddy? Add a
Added
column?
a column to the housing tracking spreadsheet specifically for PSH units.
Ah, so you're recommending to do that?
They did
Cool.
it.
Oh, they did?
Hey.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
We'll be presenting that, is it next month or the month after? We'll be presenting our formal 2022 housing snapshot to the committee. We have it out to key partners, including Liddy, to review, to make sure all of our numbers are correct and it's ready for full sharing, but it's on the horizon, it's coming.
Excellent.
Awesome, thank you. I feel like it's so rare. We ask a housing question and the answer is like, you know what, it's going well.
Right.
Anything else, Veronica? Just looking at our flow chart of questions as we are talking.
Unfortunately, there was no flow. The other things aren't important. Or, yeah, I can look it up later.
Okay, anything else anybody wanted to add or ask about this, for this conversation today? Okay, I'll just end by saying Greg Mezey, the chair of this committee, was sorry he couldn't be here today, but of course he'll watch the video and we will follow up with this. So I appreciate your patience as I'm trying to chair the meeting, and I appreciate Veronica's help in reminding me of things and everybody else. So I think we're all set with this discussion for today, and we'll bring it up again. I believe we'll talk with Greg about possibly bringing it up for next month to see if we're going to look at, you know, I like ideas of, you know, adopt sections, approve sections, you know, something in between that we could talk about. And I really appreciate everybody, you know, coming today. Tammy, thank you. Don't go back on screen. You don't have to, but thank you for tuning in even though you're sick. And I want to say thank you to Cindy and Liddy and Nels for being here today and participating in our discussion. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us to the table. It was, that was unexpected, and thank you.
Anytime. And on your way out, I have got some scones and muffins to take back with you.
Oh, I love a scone.
Thank you.
Right here at the table. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you for coming, and feel better, Tammy.
So for the committee, was there any committee reports or any other topics from the committee members, the many committee members, and Mike and Veronica, that would be you folks? Anything else I missed, Jordan?
You just reminded me I wanted to report back on the Food System Summit, but I wanted to do that not in this committee, so
peak.
I wanted to do it last night, but I forgot.
Oh.
But I'm saying it out loud so that I'll remember.
Okay. Yes, that would be, yeah, we can report on that. There, you forgot the scones. Okay, so I think with that, we'll officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for coming today.